What's a widely accepted fact that you're 100 sure is completely wrong? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. Birds abandon their babies if a human touches them. That's straight up incorrect. If you find a nestling, featherless or very patchy feathers small, on the ground, it's okay to put it back in the nest. If you find a fledgling, fully feathered, just awkward looking, leave it alone. But if it's in immediate danger, it's okay to move it short distances. I had to do this when a red-winged blackbird fledgling was sitting in the middle of the road refusing to move. I moved him over into the grass. Answer: totally agree, and your explanation is spot on. As an aside and related to the original question, I 100 believe the original fact about why you shouldn't touch baby birds was invented, or at least intentionally inflated, propagated by adults from a few generations ago to get kids to stop messing with birds' nests when they were out climbing trees. It's a lot easier to get a kid to not do something when you have some objective fact about nature to back you up. Don't touch them, you'll hurt it, get sick at sea. Would have been a much weaker argument. With the combination of iPads, helicopter parenting, and a general decline in outside fun being more the norm for kids these days, I don't think there are nearly as many instances of them climbing trees, so the likelihood of kids messing with birds' nests has probably also been reduced. Just as my take though. Story 2. Goldfish have a 3-second memory. Just not true, and no reason it would be. Studies have shown they can form memories and retrieve them at least weeks later. Story 3. That humans swallow lots of spiders in their sleep. I don't think there's any evidence for this, and I don't think spiders would crawl in and get swallowed. They'd avoid a hot, vibrating surface in an incredibly humid environment like inside our mouths. Answer: people would be shocked if they knew half the things they ingest through the course of their lives. Not sure about spiders, but lots of foods contain insects. Sometimes it's unavoidable. The FDA allows certain levels of insect fragments, whole insects, insect eggs, and larvae in various foods like cornmeal, asparagus, spinach, and peanut butter. Rodent matter is also seen as an unavoidable extra ingredient in plenty of your food. Specifically, the FDA allows an average of 30 or more insect fragments per 100 grams of peanut butter and 1 or more rodent hairs per 100 grams. These limits are based on the understanding that it's economically impractical to produce food that is completely free of natural defects. Story 4. That lobsters don't feel pain. This is often cited as justification for boiling them alive for eating, when animal cruelty regulations mean that it would never be acceptable to do that to, for example, a chicken. It's now generally believed by the scientific community that they do feel pain, which is why some countries are beginning to ban the process of boiling them alive, but many are slow to catch on. Story 5. I have had multiple people tell me confidently that AC only cools air 20 degrees cooler than what it is outside, even though they are all constantly in buildings that are cooled to 70 when it is 100 outside. This seems like a go-to excuse when AC isn't working somewhere. I heard people tell me this when I lived in Las Vegas, LOL. Answer: a lot of ACs will grow icicles and then stop working if used too heavily for extended amounts of time. I'm a train conductor, and for some trains there's directives to set the AC to hot, which means 23 or 24 C whenever the outside temperature rises above a certain threshold, e.g. 35 C. Some trains' ACs don't mind any temperature we can reach yet in Germany. Story 6. Vitamin C cures and/or prevents colds. Obviously, we need vitamin C to be healthy, but the myth around vitamin C specifically helping with colds was popularized by a guy called Linus Pauling. He was a well-respected scientist in other fields and a 2-time Nobel Prize winner. So a lot of people trusted his opinion, but by the point he started espousing this, he was sort of losing it a bit and just basically believed something that some quack wrote to him about. There's no particular evidence that vitamin C specifically prevents or cures colds. Like I say, obviously we need to have it, but when you have a cold and people say, oh, get lots of vitamin C, or when they start taking extra vitamin C, it's just not the case that it helps. Getting more than you need just creates expensive urine and possibly puts a strain on your kidneys. This myth is so prevalent, though, that I've found a lot of people seem to genuinely get annoyed when you dispute it, so I tend to just let it go. Answer: my favorite Linus Pauling, who was, last I checked, the only person to win 2 solo Nobel Prizes, quote is, when asked how he has so many good ideas, he replied, I have a lot of ideas and I throw out the bad ones. Despite being an absolutely juggernaut in molecular biophysics, basically discovering some fundamental basics of how protein folding works, the only time you'll hear his name mentioned in most high school biology classes is when talking about the structure of DNA. He posited the triple strand model the same time Watson and Crick posited the correct double strand model. Poor guy was definitely a genius, but for anyone to believe he was batting 1,000, they're being intentionally ignorant. Story 7. Corsets are not oppression machines. More people nowadays are realizing that it's a common misconception that historically they were restrictive, painful, or harmful. In reality, most women wore them for everyday comfort and posture support. It is not any more oppressive than a modern bra, though there are still those that argue that both are a product of misogyny. Extreme tight lacing was rare and often sensationalized, especially in later moralist or feminist critiques. For most, corsets were practical garments tailored to their bodies, not suffering machines. Hollywood actresses that have complained about corsets in the past truly just didn't have a good one made for their body, and I've seen some had to wear theirs directly on their skin, while historically there was always something underneath, because they couldn't be washing corsets all the time, so they just replaced their undergarment chemise. Answer: the first time I was laced into a corset, I loved how comfortable I felt. I then wore it all day, including when we went on a roller coaster. And to those who say corsets and bras are products of misogyny are idiots and/or extremely flat-chested. Any woman who has breasts bigger than an A cup who does more than just sit around at home will know these products were invented to help us be able to do things like walk, run, exercise, and generally live without pain. Plus, the bra, at least, was invented by a woman. I suspect the origins of the corset and its creator are lost to time. Story 8. That we can all work to retire at age 69 and beyond after having worked 50 years in physically demanding jobs. Story 9. Nothing 95 of dog trainers and handlers working with corrections punishments and alpha theory bullshit are just plain wrong and scientifically outdated for decades, but continue to spread outdated crap out of habit, social bubbles, and often just because it subconsciously feels good to dominate weaker beings. Answer: I'd say more like 100. Dogs aren't wolves, and the wolf studies were wrong anyway. Here's a PSA. Dogs have adapted and grown alongside humans for, well, forever, it seems like. They can process human language, are loyal to a fault, and experience complex emotions. Of course, you can beat children into submission as well, but that doesn't mean you should or that it's effective. It's not. Dogs, like children, respond to reward minor punishment, but much more to reward. That doesn't mean hurting your friend when they don't understand carpet is not the same thing as grass and that you're not supposed to piss on it. That means if they're doing something that can hurt them or are being aggressive, nipping at their butt the way that a mother would or another friendly dog would is all you should need to do. And for fudge's sake, just tell your dog not to do something and give them a treat when they go outside will solve all your problems for you. They like to learn. All my dogs tend to only piss on the carpet once because I don't have any, and it seems pretty similar to what they're used to. They're smaller than us, and especially puppies can only hold it for so long. Give them the space to make mistakes and to walk away when they're irritated, and reward them when they don't. If you're mad, send them to their room. Everyone likes their own space sometimes, so if they're comfortable and happy with a crate, they'll just go to bed when you talk too much when they're sleepy. And don't forget, barking is extremely natural for dogs. If your dog barks, it's what they do and what they're meant to do. All dogs need training, and if they're a barker, teach them what quiet means, and they'll stop when you ask them to. Do all training to also include hand signals, and it'll be easier. At least in my experience, it subconsciously feels good to dominate weaker beings. Not for everyone. It can feel good to win, sure, but I fully suffer if I cause suffering, and it feels very bad. In the case of winning, it's not a game, and it's not enjoyable unless it's fair, and I have the chance to lose. Story 10. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Just personally, I feel more energetic and sharper without breakfast, and by 12 hours, I'm hungry enough to enjoy the meal. If I do eat breakfast, I'm far more sluggish and am hungry again by mid-morning. Answer: I used to feel this way. I think the reasons for feeling sluggish after breakfast were the garbage food considered acceptable breakfast fare and eating it too early, especially before getting any exercise. The schedule is sort of forced by modern life because most people have to go to work or school, and therefore are supposed to have breakfast before they leave, forcing that to happen at like 7:00 a.m. If on top of that, they are eating all carbs, or even worse, a bunch of refined sugar, heck yeah, they will feel awful. Story 11. The chiropractors are anything but pseudoscience and snake oil. I wouldn't trust a chiropractor with my plastic Halloween skeleton. Story 12. Love languages were made up by a Christian self-help author with no psych background. They came from a marriage advice book. Answer. Even if love languages were supported with hundreds of peer-reviewed studies and published in all the fancy psych journals, it would still be a made-up concept. The fact that it's made up isn't some kind of indictment. Lots of things are made up. The concept of a love language, even if it's not scientific, is still a very useful framework that helps people understand their partner's needs. Story 13. Urine is sterile. It's only sterile in your bladder, not your urinary tract. So by the time it comes out of you, it's not sterile anymore. Story 14. That the only man-made structure you can see from space is the Great Wall of China. There are massive cities, FFS. Story 15. Living in a cold country, I bump into way too many people online thinking the warm feeling you get from a shot or two of adult beverage in cold weather means the adult beverage is warming you up. This is somewhat amplified by the classic image of a St. Bernard's rescue dog who a British painter, who simply didn't know better, once painted carrying a cute small barrel of liquor. Your body fine-tunes where and how much blood is circulated. In cold conditions, your face, for instance, will typically experience reduced circulation. Pushing huge amounts of blood to an exposed part of the body would mean acting like a radiator that's trying to heat up the air around it, losing more heat energy than necessary for staying safe. As adult beverage dilates those veins your body so smartly constricted, you're leaking out a considerable amount of heat, working against your ability to stay warm in the following hours. Giving adult beverage to a person with any level of hypothermia is like nudging them towards passing instead of helping them, and it works in the same direction when hypothermia is not an issue yet. Norwegian expedition leader Fridtjof Nansen pretty much banned the use of adult beverage on expeditions he led, as he saw it having excessive negative effects on people. Story 16. Menstrual cycle syncing is not a thing. It's completely coincidental, seeing as there's only about 4 weeks in a month. Any evidence that such a thing occurs is purely anecdotal, only backed up by confirmation bias. Answer. Adding to that, women's periods can differ in duration based on many factors like stress, sickness, medication, weight loss, etc. Some women's cycles are 27, 28, 29, and so on, days long, so mathematically, you're bound to have overlap with friends, family, and coworkers from time to time. For some reason, when I try to explain this to other women, I get passing stares like I'm a gender traitor for not going along with this myth. Story 17. That migraines are triggered by eating cheese or chocolate. This remains a popular accepted fact, despite not being supported by evidence. From what I can tell, the belief goes back to a few small studies in the late 1960s-70s. Diet sources. 50 years ago, scientists blamed migraines on cheese and chocolate. Answer. The fudge did cheese and chocolate come from? And how old a thinking is that? My migraines are triggered by weird light condition changes from sunlight to old shoot neon lights. The frequency of them used to trigger things, and it used to be a lack of caffeine, though I'd mostly tapered myself off that. Also, the main thing that has kept migraines away for a long time now is awareness, but also having less concussions. If on story 18, that people used to do biphasic sleep in the Middle Ages. Some guy pulled this idea from a few extremely tenuous quotes, wrote a book on it, and somehow now it's like accepted knowledge on the internet. But literally all sources just point back to the same one guy. I've never heard or seen any other legit historian talk about it. I swear half of his evidence was people casually mentioning waking up in the night, because many people do wake up randomly in the night. Sometimes they even get up and have a glass of water or check their phone or whatever. That doesn't mean we all as a society practice biphasic sleep together. The other half of his evidence was people mentioning first sleep and second sleep. Again, occasionally, in most of these cases, this is just as likely to mean the light sleep of someone who has just fallen asleep versus the deeper sleep of someone snoring in the middle of the night. If people really slept in two distinct sessions, we would definitely know about it. Medieval people did like to write quite a lot, and we do have some very good sources about how people generally live their lives. Books like Montaigne, where the records of the Inquisition were utilized to build a hugely detailed picture of daily life in that small southern French village. Medical texts, for example, which discuss insomnia. Criminal justice records. I know he uses some of these, but again, very tenuously. Criminals, of course, go around in the night, and perhaps sometimes their victims or witnesses just so happen to be up at the same time. Just like today, not enough evidence to suggest there was a hugely different way of sleeping. But you know who did practice biphasic sleep, and we definitely know about it because they wrote in very great detail about every hour of their lives? That's right, monks. They specifically got up in the middle of the night to pray matins, and they dislike it. Well, okay, perhaps that is a strong word, but it was and is because monks still exist, viewed as a sort of little penance. Practically any monk who mentions it will agree. It's not easy getting woken up at midnight and having to go to church to pray, but they do it for the love of God. Novices are often recorded as being late or falling asleep in the prayer as the whole thing is new to them. When the monastic rules became lax in some abbeys, guess what was one of the first things to go? That's right, matins. They pushed it right to the end of the night dawn next to lauds so they wouldn't have to get up in the middle of the night. In fact, that's why it came to be known as matins, i.e., the morning, rather than the original name vigils, which comes from the term for being awake in the night. Strange behavior for people who were apparently super used to getting up at 1 a.m. to shimmy around for a bit visiting their neighbors. Answer, good to know. I fell for this theory because it made sense to me. Peasants and laborers work from dawn till dusk, go home to eat dinner, and maybe go to bed early enough that they might wake up in the wee hours, get up to some nighttime activities, and then go back to sleep for a few hours before dawn. Especially in wintertime, darkness falls quite early, and there is not much to do when you don't have anything but candlelight, and candles were an expense. Story 19. The belief that people are putting needles or sharp objects in children's Halloween candy goes back to the Industrial Revolution. In reality, it's very rare. Story 20. That our brains aren't fully developed until age 26. Neuroscientists explicitly reject this, so I'm not even entirely sure what the origin story is here. Story 21. The Spanish Inquisition was largely a myth. This is a fairly well-accepted fact, but the popular belief that it happened persists. It did exist, but not like the stories. It was the only court that could hold clergy, nobility, and wealthy members of society accountable. When the Spanish started to migrate to parts of Italy, the Italians basically made up the myth as a racist mantra. Also, churches didn't suppress books and knowledge the way they often get portrayed. Catholics established one of the oldest still operating scientific communities in the world. And we're only mad at Galileo for publishing without waiting for peer review. They were on track to confirm his findings and help him publish, not telling him that the Earth just had to be the center of the universe. Again, fairly well documented, including how the common misconception came to be, which was basically that Galileo was a huge D-bag who wanted to market himself. So he made up the scandal to get the likes, throwing his fellow Catholic Church-funded researchers under the bus in the process. Answer. This is like half true. The Spanish Inquisition is not a myth. The reality is that it did happen, but it was a political agenda rather than a religious one. It was, like you suggested, actually somewhere between a political religious crusade. The Dominicans were very much running a little wild, which was, again, political more than ecumenical. The Jesuits were the actual Bible readers, who were both the warriors of Christ and also the actual readers of the Bible. I think a lot of it gets tangled up in the witch trials in the U.S. Very few witches were actually burned at the stake in the Americas. Mostly just drowning and hanging were the thing. The Spanish Inquisition, on the other hand, burned a shitload of people. Story 22. That you need to use the Leidenfrost effect to prevent food from sticking to a pan, especially eggs. The temperature needed to achieve that is really high, and the common explanation YouTube chefs give makes no sense. They said the vapor layer causes the food not to stick, similar to how it makes water droplets float on the pan. But what happens the moment food hits the pan? The pan rapidly cools down and your food sticks. And also, why would you need to use oil at all if the Leidenfrost effect is going to keep your food unstuck the whole time? I think what's happening is that the crust it forms doesn't stick, and that the crust forms quicker on a hotter pan. I saw an egg cooking tutorial where they say you have to heat up a pan until the water beads to fry an egg. Directly afterwards, they give an alternative way to slowly fry an egg on low heat, and it doesn't stick. That was enough proof to me that the Leidenfrost hype is BS in the cooking community. Answer. I had to scroll down way too far to bump into the first cooking-related answer. It really is way too common to see someone speaking with a tone of voice filled with authority while spewing out absolute garbage when it comes to cooking. Wonder if it's a combination of not actually having any sort of a scientific approach to things and a need to sound like the boss in what seems to be a high hierarchy branch of business. In addition to what you said, other examples include classics like Next, caramelize the onions for 10 minutes. Caramelizing is more likely to take 60 minutes. Story 23. Bulls are enraged by the color red, which is why matadors always have red capes or flags to taunt them with. That's complete bullshit, as bulls are colorblind. It's the movement that attracts them, not the color. Story 24. If you want to lose weight, the most important thing to do is exercise. Nope. It's pretty much all diet. Exercise had a whole bunch of other health benefits, though. Story 25. Myth. Eating turkey makes you sleepy because of the amino acid tryptophan it contains. Chicken contains approximately the same amount. Soybeans and oatmeal have more, which is why folks get sleepy at Thanksgiving. Fact, it's not the tryptophan. It is the crash after eating lots of carb-rich foods and sometimes adult beverage. The body slows down to digest and metabolize all that food that folks overindulge with on Thanksgiving. Story 26. Be very suspicious of any fact that has the number 7 in it. Gum stays in your stomach for 7 years? Of course not. How would that even work? It will either be a bowel obstruction or pass through you like anything else. Cell atoms are replaced every 7 years. No, you have some cell lines that last for life like neurons. The average person eats 7 spiders a year in their sleep. Just because there are a lot of spiders in the world doesn't mean they are crawling in your mouth every 2 months. Story 27. Fans only move hot air around, so they're pointless. Nope. A fundamental misunderstanding of how cooling works and not true fact. It is true, but it's exactly what you want if you don't have AC on a hot day. Evaporation works by temperature or air current increases. Of course, humidity needs to be acceptable. Answer. Counterpoint to this. I have heard people say that they left their fans on while they were away from the house so that it would be cooler when they got back. In that situation, fans are actually pointless because all they are doing is moving the hot air around and generating heat from their motor. Though that's probably such a small amount of heat that it's insignificant. Fans only work when there is a person present to benefit from the increased evaporation. Story 28. My ex-bug guy, Terminix, told me that daddy long legs in my garage are the most poisonous spiders in the world, but their mouths are too small or weak to harm you. 1. Daddy long legs aren't spiders. They are harvestmen in the U.S. 2. My garage had cellar spiders, not daddy long legs. 3. Spiders are venomous, not poisonous. 4. Cellar spiders aren't the most venomous or poisonous spiders in the world. I didn't believe this when I was 8 years old, and I can't believe there are adults who still believe it. Especially someone who is supposed to be a professional. This guy also put out bait traps for a vole I had in my yard. I had a substitute bug guy come around and he told me those don't work on voles. I ended up taking care of the vole myself. Story 29. All white people in the 1800s were white supremacists. I'm a 19th century U.S. historian, and I can assure you this claim is completely wrong. Story 30. The whole humans only use 10 of their brain myth has been debunked so many times. Brain imaging shows activity all across the brain, even when we're resting. It's just nonsense used to downplay how complex our brains really are. Story 31. Pigeons are dirty animals and spread diseases. Completely wrong. Pigeons love to bath and preen almost constantly to keep their feathers flight-worthy. Although pigeons can catch illnesses, they are not a vector, and there is simply no record or document showing humans actually contracting diseases from pigeons. Don't believe me? Millions of pigeons live in cities worldwide, in such close proximity of humans. If they could pass diseases, the human race would have been wiped out entirely several times over. Pigeons mate for life. Both male and female take shifts caring for their young. Both male and female produce crop milk to feed their young. They preen each other and feed each other to strengthen their bonds. Pigeons are the symbol of God's messengers, and rightly so. They are the very embodiment of love and peace. They just poop a lot, but so do you. Story 32. Circumcision is healthier than being uncut. Somehow people justify genital mutilation as a religious practice, but then back it up with claims that removing the foreskin is somehow healthy. It's just sick and cruel. Story 33. That a good way to prevent bullying in school is to have stricter rules, less liberty, or stronger punishment for bullies. Story 34. Well, I used to think the quote of using only 10 of your brain was true. Now that I'm older and have worked with people, I'm sure it's accurate. Story 35. Carrots are good for your eyesight. This was British propaganda from WW2 to explain why their fighter pilots were so successful. The truth was they were using radar. Story 36. The wolf packs are run by male wolves. That survival of the fittest applies. It doesn't. Wolves and other dogs are actually matriarchal. Story 37. Carrots don't improve eyesight. That was propaganda spread by the British in WWII to cover for the fact they started using radar. Story 38. Deoxygenated blood in your body is blue. I've met so many professional nurses and even doctors who swear this is true. Story 39. That always saying person, and I is correct. Example, give the ball to Beavis and I is wrong because you wouldn't say give the ball to I. It's give the ball to Beavis and me. Correct. Itchy and I are going to the store. Correct. Give the darn ball to Scratchy and me. Story 40. Bigfoot doesn't exist. Mark my words. The ongoing North Carolina University DNA study will find unknown great ape DNA. Story 41. Cracking your knuckles causes arthritis. Multiple studies say otherwise. It's just gas bubbles popping in the joint. I still don't get it though. What exactly causes the sound? Story 42. The fact that everyone says all facts are true, they are true until they are proven to be false. For example, we accepted the fact that the sun went around the earth until Galileo proved that the earth went around the sun. Then that fact was false. Answer. Similar but more frustrating is that most of what people consider common sense is actually applying simplified logic from one domain to another, often with disastrous results. As an example, I heard a story once of a high poverty and low education community had a lot of baby deaths, specifically due to things like diarrhea. Turns out it's because these very young and not very educated mothers were applying the logic of buckets to their babies. If it is leaking, do not fill it until the leak has stopped. Education and salt packs more or less ended up solving the problem and removed a lot of infant deaths. I see similar misapplications over simplifications of logic every day. People compare balancing a government's budget to balancing a single household's budget, or thinking that weight loss is simple thermodynamics instead of complex biological hormonal systems combined with thermodynamics. Story 43. Every business take I see massively upvoted on Reddit. A whole lot of people with absolutely no knowledge on a subject with big anti-vax Facebook mom energy, upvoting just some of the worst takes on the site. Story 44. There's a rare genetic mutation that turns women's eyes purple, super duper rare, but it has other effects like period pains aren't a thing for them and a few other myths. I was livid when I found out a pair of researchers purposefully spread the rumor online to try and prove how quickly false facts spread on the internet. Buddies, if you are researchers, then people are going to tend to believe you, especially if you make a fake, well-researched article about it. It just proved to me researchers are both bored and usually assholes. Answer, I mean, they did prove their point. Instead of waiting for peer reviews and/or reading the study to understand it, people just read the Cliff Notes version or the headline of a news article and went with it. You shouldn't trust something just because researchers said so, at least not without corroborating studies and reading the study to check it. Researchers have biases, researchers have agendas, researchers are humans. Believing what they say uncritically is how you get modern anti-vaxxers, who all descend from a single study chock full of lies and minis formation created by a researcher who was paid by a group of lawyers to create that study so they could sue pharmaceutical companies for their dangerous vaccines. Edit. Also, mind you, the media plays a massive role in this. In the search of clicks and engagement, they sensationalize results and clickbait everything. It's how chocolate may reduce risks of preeclampsia became chocolate helps you with your pregnancy. Consume now. This is not new, and scientists have been fighting against it for quite a while. Story 45. That learning styles don't exist. I'm not saying they 100 do, but it just sounds like one of those things that some study's going to uncover at least some evidence for in 10 years. Story 46. The economic concept that deflation is a spiral because of consumers deal seeking, waiting for prices to drop further before purchasing. Ridiculous idea that gets spit out by most mainstream outlets without a second thought. Story 47. That Alzheimer's disease is a singular disease. Alzheimer's disease is actually at least a few and likely several different disease processes with a similar presentation. Story 48. Learning styles. It's commonly parroted that students have different learning styles, but this has not held up to scrutiny. Instead, everyone learns better when information is presented in multiple ways. Story 49. That emotions are lesser and that humans should learn to transcend the limitations of being too emotional and become perfectly logical or rational beings that's beyond other animals. Emotions aren't irrational. Many animals have them as a mechanism for survival. To lack emotions is to lack the will to live. Survival of the fittest, survival of the strongest. It means survival of the one that can find a niche to best fit in. Story 50. that you benefit from drinking water through the day. Our bodies comes with a thing called thirst. There are exceptions when you need to drink without being thirsty, like medical conditions or being old or if you're running in heat, etc. And you can fill your stomach if you want to lose weight. Other than that, just drink when you're thirsty. Story 51. Common sense being a thing to any meaningful degree, it just doesn't map onto reality or produce reliable results. And to be honest, I feel like people believing in common sense kind of disproves itself because of the world we live in and the amount of division that exists. You don't even have to look far to see oceans of evidence against common sense. Instruction manuals, training being needed for almost everything for laymen, signs needing to be everywhere for everything. Like it doesn't survive a conversation with more than one employee of any given company. People disagree and come to different conclusions on basically everything. There is no grand shared subconscious. There are so many variables that go into why someone comes to a conclusion or does a thing. Common sense is a harmful myth that disrupts the learning process and alienates the teacher from the student. It feels like it exists only as an out for the frustration bad teachers experience. I say bad teachers, because any practitioner of pedagogy with more than a day of experience should, just through observation, understand this isn't real. Sorry, I've just seen this bastardization of intuition turn off so many people from learning because it alienates the student and reinforces a fixed mindset, which is antithetical to a good learning process. Answer: I haven't thought about it enough, but I almost feel like the idea of common sense disproves itself by the fact of it not being universal. You could change the definition and look at it as a barometer for an individual's cultural cohesion. But that's just so fundamentally different from how I hear common sense used, it becomes a different thing altogether. Like, take anyone from history, Einstein, one of the smartest people in history. Bring him to modern day. Do you think his common sense would remotely map on to most people's? Probably learn things that haven't changed much, but show him something completely alien to his era, but mundane to us. Will there be any meaningful intuition there or readily apparent understanding? Probably not. Story 52. The infamous picture of a man that looks badly burned and is basically suspended from the ceiling is Hisashi Uchi, the radiation victim that was kept alive for 83 days. In reality, it is the cleanup of the body of a burn victim who had recently passed in Galveston, TX. Both the doctors that worked on Uchi and the doctors from Texas claimed the picture was not Uchi. The big giveaway is that a chunk of the body's leg is amputated in the photo. There's no reason to do that for just radiation. Story 53. The mirror test being used to determine what animals are sentient. Just applying some basic common sense reveals why it's a poorly designed metric. Humans are unquestionably self-aware. But if an alien species descended on Earth and forced us to prove sentience based on whether we could identify our own scent among a mixture of scents, we'd fail too, because scent is not our primary sense. Sight is. Wouldn't it be dumb for an alien race that relies on smell to apply that same expectation to humans? You take a bunch of animals who do not rely on sight as their primary sense, shove a mirror in front of them, bonus points if they are wild animals who have never encountered a mirror before in their natural habitat. And if they freak out, we go see they don't have any self-awareness. No, you dingbat. Oh, you ma. A tiger in the Fudge Wild has never seen a mirror before and is safer assuming it is seeing a rival tiger and reacting accordingly than it is assuming it's seeing itself for the first time. What leap of logic do you use to arrive at the conclusion that the common house cat is self-aware, but a tiger isn't? I felt very vindicated when someone tested a sniff test on dogs. Only about half of dogs passed the mirror test, another transparently dumb notion we were asked to believe. But when someone designed a sniff test, one that caters to the primary sense of canines, dogs all reliably pass it. When tracking, dogs will pay attention to new scents but skip over their own, indicating that they recognize their self and don't need to explore it farther. When you see how much of this research on topics like animal pain and sentience are poorly structured and then used to justify all sorts of horrible practices like animal testing, cooking animals alive, etc., you start to see how many scientists have a real bias towards confirming that animals are dumb, unfeeling, and unemotional, not because it is true, but because it makes their job easier. They'll design some of the most transparently ridiculous tests to arrive at the conclusion they want. For some reason, the poorly designed mirror test caught on with the public, despite having so many flaws. Story 54. that the Great Wall of China is visible from space. It's not. The wall is very long, but it's also narrow and made of materials that blend into the landscape. Astronauts have repeatedly said it's not visible with the naked eye from low Earth orbit. Also, that Napoleon was short. Napoleon was around 5'6", or 5'7", which is average for his time. Confusion came from the difference between French and British measurement systems, and of course, the British propaganda intentionally exaggerated the myth. Story 55. I wholeheartedly thought that everyone knew it was an old wives' tale, and was honest to good shook when an adult person told me, "You need to wait 30 minuets after eating to swim after eating, or you'll drown after eating." I shoot you not. A god-dang snack bag of Doritos. I grew up on a lake. We literally ate hot dogs while actively jumping into a lake. We ate burgers in inner tubes. There was always someone in charge of boat snacks. There is no physiological way your body can say, "Ope, it's only been 27 minutes since food has passed down my gullet." TLDR, live life. Eat a whole crock pot of pulled pork immediately before you go swimming. If you drown, it's because you can't fudge swim. Story 56. That the cervix doesn't have pain receptors. This is accepted by fact by the majority of the medical community and is based on super old study. While it's true of some women, they don't need pain meds and don't react. A very large percentage of women absolutely feel pain in their cervix. So many IUDs and biopsies are given without any pain management other than the recommendation to take a Tylenol, and it's awful and downright inhumane. Let me tell you, my cervical biopsy was the single most painful experience of my life, and I've been through a lot. I passed out and barfed all over myself. It hurt so bad. Story 57. That undercover police officers don't commit crimes in the course of their investigations. That may not commit anything heinous, like takedown or violation or something like that, but lower-level crimes like selling substances or burglary? Yep, I think they do, and their handlers just look the other way. Story 58. The employees of your business should be treated as liabilities rather than as assets. The entire business world works this way, at least the publicly traded companies do. And the end result is vulture capitalism, whereby companies are dismantled from the inside and sold off for next quarter's profits. Jobs are shipped overseas or replaced by AI, and the only bottom line that matters is the stock price. But this results in a world where many companies produce nothing at all, can't sell product because their former customers have all lost their jobs, and the entire economy collapses. We're watching it happen in real time right now, but business leaders refuse to admit the obvious truth. It's not sustainable. There's an expression, you can shear a sheep many times, but slaughter it only once. Eventually, the investment class will run out of sheep. Or the sheep will unionize, vote, and fight back. But treating employees as costs to be minimized rather than as important assets to be cultivated and maintained is class warfare that historically never ends well for the wealthy class. Story 59. If you hit a deer, you have to tell your insurance company that the deer hit you. This is just outrightly false. Comprehensive coverage covers accidentally hit animals. Story 60. It's widely taught even in college that red, yellow, and blue are the primary colors. It's demonstrably probable magenta, cyan, and yellow are. Story 61. Fish and insects don't feel pain. First of all, there are studies that show that's completely incorrect. Second of all, I think it's absolutely safe to assume anything with nerve cells is capable of both pain and pleasure. If you're going to eat it, at least don't torture it. Story 62. That people driving slower than the traffic around them are more dangerous than recklessly fast drivers. Like, listen to yourself. Story 63. Isaac Newton did not have an apple fall on his head. He had a general idea of gravity existing and did research on it. Story 64. I've met an alarming amount of people who think urine is sterile. The water you drank to make it wasn't even sterile, and nothing coming out of your body is sterile. I don't understand why this persists. Story 65. That the U.S. is too big for high-speed rail networks. This is the country that built the Transcontinental Railroad in 6 years in the mid-1800s. This is the country that was built on our robust freight and passenger rail network. Europe is covered by HSR. China put up massive HSR networks in under a decade, crossing a landmass larger and farther spread out than the U.S., with much more inhospitable terrain in its western 23rds. And before anyone comes at me with, but China's population is mostly in the eastern part of the country, they put up a 196-kilometer high-speed rail line connecting Lanzhou to Urumqi. Too big, my jerk. Story 66. If you die at home, your cat will eat you. There is no documented case of a cat owner eaten by their cat after dying at home. There are cases of dogs doing that, But as far as I read about it, it's more of a panic reaction while the dog tries to wake you up. But not sure about that last part. Story 67. Orcas are not dangerous or bad. In fact, they are the only type of dolphin that are good. Orcas hunt for food, dolphins for fun. Orcas have only caused 4 deaths to humans in all of history, of which 3 were by the same orca. Dolphins more than 150 a year. Orcas respect other orcas. Dolphins violation females and take down calves so they can violation their mothers. Answer, is this satire? Because it's not true at all. For one, there's only one passing caused by dolphins. Also, orca regularly hunt and eliminate for fun. They even make games out of throwing the carcass of animals to each other, and often don't even eat the animal they use for it. Just look at how they eliminate great whites. They only eat the liver and leave the rest to rot. Also, orca are dolphins. That's not some technicality. They aren't descended from dolphins like birds and dinosaurs. No, they literally are dolphins. They are just the largest dolphin species. All other large-toothed whales are not closely related to them. Story 68. Wood is worth far less than gold. Just one asteroid in our asteroid belt holds more gold, diamonds, platinum than the entire global GDP multiplied exponentially on top of that. Rock wood, which only exists on our planet and nowhere else in our known universe, is infinitely more rare. But that's just me, I guess. Answer, value depends on availability to us. If in terms of what is currently available to us, something is rare, that will make it more valuable. We don't currently have means to access the resources in the asteroids, so the asteroids don't currently affect the value of those resources. When we gain the technological abilities to access the asteroid resources, the values of different materials will change. Story 69. That there is no gravity in space. The feeling of zero gravity is a fact of the orbit or trajectory. An astronaut in a spacecraft in orbit is essentially in a free fall motion around the planet. That is why it feels like there's no gravity. Story 70. Not quite 100 sure, but I read that if you took every single blood vessel in your body and lined them all up individually end to end, that they'd wrap around the globe. Not trying to be incredulous, but it's just way too insane for me to not highly doubt. Answer, okay, so take a piece of A4 paper, then cut it vertically into strips, like as thin as you can, like half a centimeter or so, then lay them out into a box. You should be able to get a table to fit easily, right? Now, if we visualize it, take that and then times it by, say, 200. For a mid-sized book, that could probably fit a town or even small city, right? Now take each of those half-centimeter strips and cut them in half again and again so they're an eighth of a centimeter. You could probably get a small state to fit, right? Now, take that 200-page book and times it by about 20 to make the volume of a person in books. Now you can see how we're getting planet circumference numbers. Story 71. Every person I have ever talked seemed to think that rich people have this innate ability to handle money well or make the economy of a country better. But all the time you see how these people do not handle money well, and when they are in charge of economic matters, it often doesn't go very well. It seems to be more of a 50-150 matter. Sometimes it goes well, and sometimes it does not. The only real difference that interferes is really that rich people usually have a much better safety net, so when things go horribly bad, they still land on their feet, still rich, where a poor person would be bankrupt. So maybe this just gives the wrong image of what is really happening, and they are actually worse with economic matters than non-rich people. And since I know someone will answer that they are still better with economic matters or they wouldn't be rich in the first place, people aren't always rich because they have made all those money for themselves, but very often it's just generational wealth or pure luck that does it. Story 72. That vegetal proteins need to be combined if you are a vegetarian. It is a myth that was debunked, but for some reasons it is still going on. Story 73. The numbers regarding outdoor house cats eliminate birds. I've seen people on Reddit claim it's tens of billions of birds, and I'm like, that means every cat has to be taking down like 500 a day. I don't own a cat, never have, and don't really care much about whether 1 or 2 runs around my neighborhood. But if Reddit were right, then the neighborhood would be littered with so many bird corpses that we would have to clean them up every day. Story 74. That your hair grows back thicker when you shave it, which is totally not true. It just feels and appears thicker because you've blunted the end of the hair. Story 75. That the word female can be used as a noun. It's an adjective, and I cringe every time someone says things like a group of females, the female over there, etc. You're allowed to say women and girls, or don't even gender people, just say person people. Story 76. That we will never travel faster than light. I think we will. There was a time when people thought you couldn't break the sound barrier. I know what physics says, but I suspect we will find something that will allow us to travel faster. Whether it be true warp drives or some other way, I think humans will eventually learn how to travel from A to B faster than light could get there. Story 77. Leftists, Muslims, and immigrants are dangerous and bring crime and instability to their communities in the U.S. In reality, citizens commit violent crimes at significantly higher rates than immigrants, and far-right terrorist attacks happen more often, and were responsible for more lives lost in the U.S. than any other ideology since 9/11. Story 78. Mussolini made the trains run on time. He did not. This has been thoroughly debunked by historians. It was just a propaganda slogan. Yet the line is often repeated as proof that dictatorship is more effective than other systems. Story 79. The golden ratio in art is complete B's. Following the golden ratio doesn't create some inherently aesthetically pleasing symmetry. It's a random mathematical curve, and you guys trained your brain to recognize and like it. Story 80. Moon is responsible for your bad sleeping. There's more gravity impact from the building next to you than from the moon, so stop this bullshit. Story 81. Mayfly translates to STH like one day fly in German. So many Germans believe that they only live one day, although that's a metaphorical exaggeration of their relative short lifespan. At least most US people do not believe that they only exist in May. Story 82. That goldfish has a 3-second memory. People still say this all the time, but it's just not true. I had a goldfish when I was a kid, and it remembered things, where I kept the food, when feeding time was, and even seemed to recognize me. Studies have shown they can remember things for months. It's funny how we've all just accepted that myth for so long. Story 83. Korean fan passing also exists in my Central European in-laws culture. Go to bed with a breeze fan, air conditioning certain passing. Story 84. Fiber only matters for old people. There's like 3 of the top 10 causes of passing in the US that you can reduce risk from just eating vegetables a lot throughout your entire life. Story 85. For some reason in the last 2 decades, people became obsessed with constantly drinking water, and it's completely unnecessary. Most people get all the water they need from the food they're already eating. The 8 glasses of water a day rule is completely made up, but my God, do teenagers love their water bottles. Story 86. The you lose most heat through your head is not true. It is based on an American military experiment where they sent soldiers to the Arctic or somewhere cold, gave them insulated clothes, and used thermal imaging cameras to monitor their body heat. They forgot to insulate their headgear, and it looked like they were losing way more heat through their heads than they should be. In fact, you lose no more head through your head per square inch than any other part of your body. Answer. This is a nearly true statement. In fact, you do lose more heat through your head than elsewhere, just not more than anywhere else. However, the collection of blood vessels near the surface, lack of any real insulating layer of fat like mist of your body, and then coupled with the rest of the you lose most of your body heat through your head statement, which is actually if you're wearing proper winter outerwear and no hat that most of the heat you're losing is through your head. I believe it's about half. Other body parts that have high heat loss are your toes and fingers, but people already know that, and there are usually pain triggers associated with them getting too cold. Not so much for your face and ears, so the heart of the statement and reasoning is sound. Story 87. Why we only use 10 of our brain. This idea is a pervasive urban legend that has been thoroughly debunked by neuroscientists. Brain imaging techniques like fMRI and PET scans clearly show that we use virtually all parts of our brain over the course of a day, even during sleep. Different activities engage different areas, but no significant portion remains consistently dormant. Story 88. Black holes have a point or ring of infinite density in the middle. First of all, we have no way to know for sure. Secondly, the vast majority of physicists think that's just our theory failing to understand what's actually inside, and that infinities, like, aren't physically real. Story 89. Kronos, father of Zeus, is the Titan of time. He's Titan of the harvest. Literally everyone confuses him with Kronos, the personification of time. See, Greek mythology does this weird thing where there's gods and also concepts, and they're completely separated for some reason. For example, Apollo is the god of the sun, among other things, while Helios is the actual sun. That said, there's literally nothing linking Cronus, or Kronos, however it's spelled, to Kronos except a strikingly similar spelling. That's because they were both created at different times in ancient Greece. The worst part is that it absolutely makes sense just narratively and creatively, to have Cronus be the Titan of time, but he specifically isn't. Trust me, I would love for that to be the case, but in every academic study and retelling of the Titan Namashi, they go out of their way to precise Cronus is the Titan patron of the harvest. That's what the scythe is for, also for cutting his own dad's balls off, but that's another story for another time. If you're wondering what's Kronos' part in all this, the answer is negligible. Like most personification deities in Greek mythology, their presence is either irrelevant to the grand scheme of things, except when they're specifically called upon, or most of their lore was destroyed in one of the fires in Alexandria. As far as Orphic tradition is concerned, Kronos was born out of the void and created chaos, ether, and the cosmic egg from which the deity Phanes came out of, and that led to the creation of the first generation of gods, aka Titans. There's a direct line to be found from Kronos to Cronus, and I dislike it, and everyone gets it wrong when they shouldn't, but the ancient Greeks clearly didn't give a fudge about cohesive storytelling. There's other more egregious examples TBH here. Story 90. New Coke was a conspiracy to hide the fact that they switched over to HFCS. In reality, they switched years before New Coke was even introduced. Story 91. Ancient scholars once believed the sun was carried across the sky in a giant chariot. We have since learned that the ignorant fools were just making shoot up to explain something they didn't understand. Ancient scholars once believed diseases were caused by tiny little demons swimming around in our blood. We have since learned that the ignorant fools were just making shoot up to explain something they didn't understand. Ancient scholars once believed there's an invisible, toga-wearing, bearded sky grandpa that lives on top of a cloud and can read all our thoughts to see if we stroke his fragile ego sufficiently for saving us from a talking snake that conned a rib woman into eating a magic apple from a special tree. This is a widely accepted fact. Story 92. Swans do not mate for life. We found a dead swan and contacted the number on the ring on its leg to report. The bird people came to collect. They told us the swan had come from a different area about at least 35 miles away. That swans move around more than people think. The final thing we were told was that despite most people believing the old romantic notion that swans mate for life, apparently in reality, they're quite promiscuous, especially the male swans moving around and mating with different females, different years, but also sometimes within the same year. Story 93. Kind of niche, but that ancient Middle Eastern cultures believed there was a dome above our visible atmosphere and an ocean above it, and that is why the sky is blue. It is significantly more likely that the ocean they're talking about are the clouds floating in the sky, and the metal dome is the invisible barrier that holds the clouds up. Mountains are supposed to hold the dome heavens up, and mountains can make contact with the cloud barrier, but the atmosphere clearly extends far beyond them. Story 94. That we should always wear sunscreen. People get offended if I tell them that skin can actually become more capable of handling sun if you gradually accrue the amount of melanin in your skin. Burning your skin is dangerous and leads to DNA damage, but small amounts are most likely healthy. Story 95. Americans use the word fife when talking about old world musical wind instruments, but I'm 2000 convinced it's a misinterpretation of the way the word pipe used to be written. Story 96. Mind 1. Coffee is dehydrating. Data suggests that coffee, consumed in moderation, provides similar hydrating qualities to water. 2. Columbus discovered the earth was round. Educated people knew for many centuries the earth was round. 3. Popular personality tests are accurate. Myers-Briggs, Enneagram are hardly useful. Big Five is better, but personality is complex and not fixed. 4. Astrology, Barnum affect anyone? 5. Ability to learn languages is mostly genetic or a special skill. In certain cultures, nearly everyone speaks 2, 3, or more languages, regardless of natural talent. Story 97. I didn't realize being an adult meant deciding what to eat every day for the rest of my life. I thought the menu just kept showing up. Story 98. Cornflakes were invented to prevent self-care. Nope. 2 completely separate stories about the same person that got smashed into one. Why? Because cornflakes were invented to prevent self-care is a lot more interesting than the Kellogg brothers invented cornflakes as a healthy food for their sanitarium patients. And then 30 years later, one of them ran a public health campaign urging people to circumcise their children because he was a devout Seventh-day Adventist and believed circumcision would prevent self-care. Answer. I've never heard that urban legend. There's a kernel of truth to it, Because cornflakes were developed as a plain, bland food in keeping with Kellogg's belief that excessively flavorful, rich or spicy foods excited lust. But that idea didn't originate with Kellogg. That shoot goes back to the Puritans and beyond. But yeah, it's not like cornflakes were specifically marketed as an anti-wanking solution. They were healthy, and part of Kellogg's idea of healthy included blandness and simplicity. And he thought a healthy lifestyle would result in less impure thoughts and therefore less self-care. So it's less of an outright falsehood and more of an oversimplification. Story 99. Sharper kitchen knives are safer than dull ones? Bullshit. I've accidentally cut myself so many times with sharp knives and never with dull. Story 100. That immigration is why the Tories screwed the general public in England for 14 years. And that stopping small boat crossings will make everyone rich happy. Story 101. That a defibrillator restarts the heart. It does the opposite, stops it. Then they heart stats again all by itself if it can. Story 102. That the Big Bang is the truth. It's unproven but widely accepted. There are multiple theories out there about the start of the universe, and we will never really know. Story 103. The Wicker Man's sacrifices. It's more likely that was Caesar talking shoot on the Gauls. They did do some sacrifices, but most of them were dead beforehand. Likely dead Roman soldiers. Story 104. The Great Wall of China is visible from space. First of all, what the fudge do you mean with space? Like outside the atmosphere, in that beautiful void called the thermosphere, or simply just out of the troposphere? Either way, you're going to find out that the Great Wall of China is great only because of its length, since for width, it's as big as a fudge standard house. Story 105. The idea of a born genius, or that some people are born generally more intelligent than others altogether. Story 106. People used to say that if you pulled into a residential driveway while being pulled over, the cops couldn't do anything. Even if it were true, it's not like a cop wouldn't hassle you anyway. It's the same with them needing permission to search your car. I've had my car searched without permission multiple times. Cops break rules, and unless it goes viral, nobody who can do anything about it usually cares. Story 107. You can't let somebody sleep if they have a concussion. It's such a stupid belief, and a 5-second search would disprove it, yet it keeps showing up in media. I don't get it. Story 108. Oh God, I'm almost too scared to read these comments. I sense they're going to be brimming with conspiracy theorists and their alternate reality LOL. But here goes anyway. Story 109. Golden doodles, or any doodle, are hypoallergenic is just wrong. Poodles have hair instead of fur that sheds, which can lessen allergies in people allergic specifically to dog dander. However, if you mix a poodle with another breed, they don't magically acquire all the good traits of both breeds. It's a mix. They may or may not have the traits of either parents, good or bad. Mixing two mixed breeds does not guarantee traits either. It just creates even more variation. Story 110. Ostriches don't put their head in the sand. They hide it in their plumage. Lemmings don't eliminate themselves. That was a lie in a documentary that literally had a crew who hurled them off a cliff to their passing. Story 111. Water is not wet, but it certainly feels wet due to its adhesion when it comes into contact with our skin. It's just sloshy molecules that are bonded together far weaker than its solid state. Story 112. 9 in 9 out of 10 doctors, dentists, vets at sea. All of these are misleading, and most people blindly believe them. It applies to an entire type of something, not a specific brand. For example, fluoride toothpaste in general, not just Colgate specifically. The generic brand is just as effective. Answer: the way they get that 910 number is they'll ask, say, 200 doctors, dentists, vets, whatever. Of them, at least 20 or so will pick their brand. So then they take 9 of these brand recommendations and number 142 who recommended another brand. They now have 910 recommend theirs. And it's legally not false advertising. Why not 1010? Because nobody would ever believe 100 of people agree on something. Story 113. That we have a chemical imbalance of the brain which is used to justify mass prescription of meds. It's never been proven ever. It's something psychiatrists admit isn't real, only ever a theory, and yet is taught as though it is a fact. I remember being taught it in high school. Try and find evidence. Doesn't exist. Story 114. I have no proof, but I find it very hard to believe that Benjamin Franklin founded America and also discovered electricity, the two most consequential things to happen in modern history. Too hard to believe. True or not, it's some Kim Jong-un stuff. Our great leader invented light and founded the motherland. Story 115. Stretching doesn't prevent muscle strain. The idea doesn't even make sense. Why would intentionally straining muscles prevent muscle strain? That's like believing that slowly driving a car into a wall will make it crash-proof. Story 116. You only dream of faces you've seen before. Your brain can't make up new faces. I can imagine a new face, so I'm pretty sure I can dream a new face. I've dreamt of monstrous creatures with their faces melting away. I've dreamt of my own face changing. Totally baseless fact. Answer: yeah, it always irritated me that people would just confidently spout that like someone had done lots of magic, completely reliable dream imaging, or made some fundamental discovery about the human brain. It also made me realize that a lot of people's remembered dreams aren't nearly as bizarre as I'd assume. Like I've dreams with a humanoid, with a bird's head like Ra, or with a flamingo lawn ornament as a head as characters. I don't think I saw those faces in real life. Story 117. That a business phone line is not actually experiencing an unusually high volume of calls at the moment. I think it's more like not enough staff have been hired so we can increase profits. Answer: working in a customer service call center as a member of management, I can say that as a general rule, we staff for average call volume with enough staff to take breaks and lunches, etc. We have SLA, service level agreements, that we have to meet, which means our ASA, average speed of answer, has to be below a certain level. Things can happen that cause higher than normal ASA. Some we are aware of, some we aren't. We do plan for events we are aware of by offering or requiring overtime, but there are things we can't predict, like our website going down, which causes a call spike. I can't speak for all call center industries, but if you're getting that message when you call us, it's probably something we didn't anticipate, which would make our call volume higher than expected. Story 118. Every even number above 2 is the sum of 2 primes. It's probably true, but it seems like it might take a long time to prove. Edit. I want everyone to know someone replied to this message with 1, as though that was somehow a gotcha. I won't name them, but I want them to know I saw it, and I am sorely disappointed. Edit 2. Edit harder. A fellow Redditor pointed out that I wasn't supposed to include 2 in the conjecture because 1 isn't prime. Story 119. The fact that gyms in 2025 still say no black-soled shoes, modern materials don't scuff that badly, and floors are easily cleaned. Story 120. That the multicolored heart emojis have different meanings. I'm sure it does, but I don't care enough to check and keep using my 2 faves. Story 121. The whole breakfast is the most important meal of the day mantra. I mean, who decided this? Was it actually nutritionists? Or was it cereal companies trying to sell more cornflakes? Because honestly, it sounds exactly like something a marketing department would come up with. I've never felt like I needed a huge breakfast to function, but I've been guilted into thinking I'm doing something wrong my whole life. Answer: I thought it was just a humorous, poetic saying. Like it's the most important meal of the day because if you don't have breakfast, then you literally can't have lunch or dinner. Skipping breakfast and then eating lunch isn't really a thing. You just broke your fast at lunchtime. Lunch was breakfast. Because breakfast means to break your fast. If you never break your fast, that's just a starvation. Historically, prior to the Industrial Revolution, a true breakfast, as we think of it today, was eaten after a few hours of work in the morning. You'd maybe have a small slice of bread soaked in milk when you first woke up if you felt hungry. Then you'd do 3 hours of hauling water and mucking out stalls and fetching firewood for the range. Then you'd be able to heat some water and fry some eggs and have a proper meal. You'd call that meal dinner, even if it was only atom when you ate it, but the food you ate to break fast was a snack by comparison. Cereal companies definitely had a role to play.